Welcome, everyone. This is Kathy Farrell in Windsor, Colorado, bringing you the August 2016 Project of the Month. This month's project is called Applique Apron with Attitude. In this month's project, be sure that you download your August 2016 free designs. Within those designs, you will have your handout and your free design to complete your project. This month, I have focused on the use of the You Design It tool in the software and one of my favorite collections in that design called Pocket Full of Notions. And within this collection of designs, you receive 5 applique pockets and then a various assortment of sewing notions that go along with the pockets. And when I saw this design collection came out, the first thing that I thought of was that would look really cute on an apron. So here you go. Within the handout will be instructions on how to complete the project successfully. This is the handout. You're going to print that. I will show you in a minute where to locate this. It is a PDF file. You cannot see this in your software. But when you download the August free designs, this is downloaded into your Floriani folder. Within the handout, you will see that I've illustrated the materials that you will need to complete the project. This is suggested. In this month's project, we are going to use Floriani Wet and Stick Stabilizer, and you can use gridded or non-gridded. I recommend Floriani Stitch Perfection Tape. This is new. It is a double-sided tape, and it is water soluble, which I love that concept. It comes in a various assortment of widths, 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch. So that's what I recommend. We're going to be doing applique, so I recommend having the Floriani Applique Wonder printable sheets. They're 8.5 by 11 so that you can just print the applique file off to your computer. And just so you know, I have included the files for applique so that you can do this. I want to show you how to do it in the software so that you can do your own, but I have included a file so that you can print this on Applique Wonder. You will need your Floriani embroidery threads and a Floriani thread chart. With your thread chart, you're going to, based on the fabric that you use, select the thread colors that complement your fabric. So that's why I think you'll notice that in my projects of the month, I consistently refer to that Floriani thread chart. And if you don't have one, when you go to your Floriani event, they don't cost very much. And I do recommend having one of those. Also, this month, I'm using the 9014 embroidery needle. And the reason for that is that I made my apron on heavy twill. And I recommend heavy twill or canvas or denim, a heavy material for this apron. My intention behind the apron was that it's going to be something that you can use in your sewing room, or if you're a long armor and it's got the pocket on there, so you can put your rotary cutter down in there and a pair of scissors and a magnifying, just whatever you might need into that pocket. And then you always have it handy. Now, the fabric is up to you, so you can use any fabric that you want. You will need decorative fabric. And I did put in here, this is a scrap-friendly project. That's the wonderful thing about Applique. Applique is scrap-friendly. So if you have smaller pieces of material that you just can't bring yourself to throw away, Applique is a great application for that. And then we're going to, instead of doing a tie on the apron, we're going to actually add webbing with a belt buckle. So you will need to get those materials ahead of time. In this project, I have included a very simple instruction pattern for making this half apron. So if this is the apron that you're going to make, and you can use any pattern you want, you probably could use a store-bought apron. But this will tell you how to lay out a pattern. And I have some clear vellum that was given to me by somebody, and it's huge. And so when I'm getting ready to construct a pattern, so I did go ahead and cut my pattern ahead of time. For this project, this is where you're going to find the handouts. You're going to go into your C drive. When you open your C drive, you select it and double click on it. There's a folder called Floriani. Within that Floriani folder, open it up and you'll find Designs. Open the Designs folder, you'll see free FTCU projects. When you open that, you'll see a list of months. So you're going to open up August because this is the August project, and then find August 2016. When you open that August 2016 folder, that is where you will find the handouts and the pattern for you to print. So print that pattern piece, and then in project preparation, even before you move to the software to work on your designs, I recommend cutting the fabric for your project. This is just the pattern that I made, and I'm going to use my mouse here to just kind of come over the top. So you'll see this. So this is the pattern. If you need to increase the size of the pattern, this is, for an adult, or decrease the size if you're making it for a child, I would just create the pattern and then fold it here, or you can cut it there and insert another piece in there. So make it larger or smaller. This is the pocket that goes over the top, and the pocket is larger. It's going to lay right in here. So the pocket's larger so that we have some additional material. And once again, if you're going to modify this pattern and make it larger or smaller, you want to modify the pattern piece by the same amount. So you would do that there. But I went ahead and did make my pattern, and then you're going to mark the fabric appropriately. We're going to be embroidering on this flap right here before we sew it together. So it's very important that you mark where you're going to put the folds in, so that when you fold it and put it on the apron, it lines up, because we're going to applique and embroider on the outside pocket, and we're going to applique on the apron up here on the top. And so we're going to lay that pocket on the front there to place those designs so that it looks like the designs are actually behind the pocket or in the pocket. And that's what I thought of when I saw these designs. All right, with that in mind, let's go ahead and move into our software lesson. I have my FTC-U software open. You want to make sure that occasionally you come into the help menu and you do a check for updates. That will take you to the myfloriani.club page so that you can check your version. If you want to know what version of the software you're on, you will come into the About, and this is going to give you your build right here. So you can always refer to that. In my software, the first thing I'm going to do is create a new design. Next, we're just going to real quickly highlight, if you purchase a You Design It collection, you need to do something a little bit different with these designs. You're going to do what's called import the collection into your software. In order to do this, I would click on File, and you have this tool right here, and it's called Import You Design It Gallery. So when you purchase one of these collections, you're not going to be able to utilize the You Design It tool until you import the You Design It collection into your software. You can still use the designs, but then you would just bring them in like any regular design. And that would defeat the purpose of how wonderful this You Design It is. So I would select You Design It. Then what you're going to do is you're going to navigate to, if you have purchased a CD and you have your CD in your computer, you would come in and you would navigate on your computer in here to that particular location. I'm going to real quickly demonstrate that because I went ahead and put the You Design It collections on my desktop. Right here, I have my pocket full of notions. You're going to, if this were a CD, you would navigate to the CD and open it up until you locate this file right here. It's a pocket full of notions, the name of the collection, .udi. Select that and then click on Open. What's going to happen is that it's going to import it in there. Now, I already have the collection installed. If I didn't have the collection installed, I would get a totally different message, and you would want to go ahead and say, you're about to install You Design It. Do you want to do that? And you say yes. At this point, it's like, would I install over the top of it? I could say yes. But once you do that, then you'll get this next menu. The You Design It gallery was imported successfully. You're now ready to use the You Design It collection. This is your You Design It tool. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on this tool. This is not a part of the handout, but it is a part of the software lesson. I want to once again review how these You Design It's work, because they are unique to Floriani Total Control U software. And I think that they are probably one of the most innovative tools that I have ever seen come along. I was really excited when I first saw these. About a year ago, they were demonstrated to me. Here's my pocket full of notions. Now, all of the You Design It collections work the same way, in that if I come to all galleries, these are all the different base components. You always want to start with a body. So let me go back here and refilter my pocket full of notions. This is the pocket that I have given you in your free design. But you've got some other pockets here. Here's a real nice rounded pocket. Here's a pocket that has a sewing tomato on there that you put your needle into. But I liked this one because it's got a zipper element. Once you start with the base, then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to come over here to the elements section. And depending on the notions or the body or the collection that you have selected, this is going to vary. But this is what excites me the most, is that it's here that you are allowed to come in and any of these. So even though you purchase a collection and it's got 5 that you build it on, if you were to sit down and factor out how many different designs you could create, I wasn't ever very good at math, so I'm not going to do that. But I will tell you right now, there are hundreds and hundreds and probably thousands of designs, unique designs that you can create with this collection alone. So I'll just kind of scroll through. Here's a really cute tomato. This is the element that I've given you. And so you'll see that you've got your seam ripper, your scissors, and your rotary cutter. So I'll go ahead and do that. Now, in the apron that I made, I also incorporated this design. So one of my pockets has the design that you've been given. And then if you look closely, and I know there are many of you out there that'll go, wait a minute, I don't have that design to make the apron. We give you 1 free design a month. Once you have this looking the way that you want it, then you come in and you say, okay. So now I've just built this design. So notice that this is applique. And once I create this, then I have the ability from here to make any of the changes. For instance, this is the satin path stitch. When I select that, I could come up and I could choose. I can customize it. I can customize any of those features that are in there. Let me go ahead and minimize this. And then this is the scissor collection. So that's just a quick review of You Design It and how you build those tools. If you do not have the You Design It collection, then you're going to go into your library panel, which are these little tabs located on the right side of your software screen. You're going to find your free FTCU projects. You're going to expand that. You're going to expand August, and you're going to highlight the August 2016 folder. Ladies and gentlemen, if I highlight this folder and come over to my Designs tab, I just want to illustrate to you. There's nothing there. It's very important when you're using the library panel or the browser panel. You want to make sure that you select here a folder that contains designs. Once you've done that, when you come to your Designs panel, then you get to see all the various elements that are included in there. So this is what I've included, and we'll go through this in a little more detail. But let's first of all build the original design. So this is the design that you're going to start with. After you bring your design in to the page, I want you to observe how this design will stitch out. And there are 2 ways to do that. Number one, you can use, this is what's called a scrub bar. And so my cursor, I'm selecting that vertical bar and I'm dragging this. And I like to use this method because it allows me to back up. And if there's something that I want to go and see in more detail, I can manipulate this. So I have total control over how I'm observing this design stitch out. Now remember, this is a simulation, but before you stitch out a design, it's really a good idea to watch observe how it's going to stitch out in your software. The other option for observing this is this tool called the Simulate Sewing. So it's to the right of the scrub bar, and when you click on the left arrow, the right arrow, or the pause, and this is how I can speed it up or slow it down, then what's going to happen is that, and let me just flip it on 3D so you can see a little bit better. Now I can observe how the design is going to stitch out. So that's the first thing that I want you to do with this design. I have backed up my design and I'm going to real briefly talk about Applique because I know that there are new people out there, people that are new to embroidery and maybe have not done Applique in the hoop before. So with Applique in the hoop, I'm going to turn this on to slow draw so the simulate sewing so that we can watch this. And now I'm going to pause it. This is what is called a placement line. So when I come over to my sequence view window, that's called applique placement. When you are doing applique in the hoop, you're going to let this design stitch out this part of the design. Your machine will then stop and it will probably tell you to use a different color thread. You don't have to do that, but you do want to stop. What you're going to do next is you're going to cut a piece of fabric that's slightly larger than this area, slightly larger, and you're going to lay it down on top of this area. That's why it's called a placement line. You stop and you place a piece of fabric down. Now let me continue with the sewing, and I'll pause right there. What just happened is that the machine came back and stitched another running stitch directly over that first one. Sometimes it's a little offset, but it's usually directly over the first one. And then it will stop again. You will then take your embroidery hoop out of your machine. Do not unhoop your fabric. You've got applique scissors or small scissors, and you're going to trim all of the fabric that's on the outside of that stitch line. You trim it away. And then you put the hoop back into the machine and you finish sewing. And so as we go through, and I'm just going to speed it up a tad so that this doesn't take forever. So this design right here is going to stitch over the top of that fabric. So it's embellishing the fabric, and then it's adding the zipper detail. The last thing that you'll see happen is going to be a satin cover stitch, and the cover stitch comes all the way around the perimeter of the applique piece, and it covers the raw edges of your applique. And there it is right there. So this satin stitch is going to cover the raw edges of the fabric that I laid down, and it gives you a beautiful finished look. And this is machine applique in the hoop. Okay, for those of you that are new to applique, hopefully you understand that a little more. I think applique embroidered applique in the hoop is really beautiful. It's so precise, and that's one of the things that kind of drew me to embroidery itself. The next thing we're going to do is add an artwork rectangle, and that's going to actually represent the apron pocket. And I like to use rectangles in my software quite frequently, artwork rectangles, not to convert into stitches, but just for the purpose of giving me a framework and an area to work in. I'm going to select under here, this is my artwork. I'm going to select the rectangle shape. I come down and I click and drag. I'm not going to worry about the size of that rectangle. I'm going to come down and under the sequence view window, the rectangle comes in at the last color that you were working with. So let's real quickly just change that color so that we can separate it out to its own separate file. We're going to transform the rectangle. When you will cut your pattern, you will have the dimensions of the pocket. In my rectangle, now make sure you have maintain aspect ratio unselected. The width of the pocket is going to be 20 inches and the height of the pocket is 7 inches. Okay, and it's kind of an approximation, but remember the whole objective behind putting that, and let me zoom to fit, the whole objective behind adding that rectangle is just to give me a workplace area. I'm going to turn off my grid just so that you can see the rectangle better. Now, here's my pocket design. And this is going to be, that pocket has pleats in it. And so I actually measured the finished height of the pocket and the finished width of the apron. If you use the measurements of the apron pocket, it's got pleats in there and it'll be too big, and so you're not going to be able to place this properly. What we're going to do is we're going to section this off, because when you create the pocket, you stitch a seam here and a seam here, and it divides that piece of fabric and gives you 3 separate pocket areas. And what we're going to do is we're going to put an embroidery pocket on the right pocket. We're going to embroider a pocket on the left pocket, and then in the middle we're going to add some text. So here's my pocket. So I'm going to move this over to the left-hand side, and I'm going to copy and paste that. And all I'm doing right now is right-click copy and right-click paste. Once I've got that pasted and it's still selected, I'm just going to move it over to the the left-hand side of the page. If you wanted to, you may want to change the size of your pocket to extend that length a little bit more. And of course, in Floriani Total Control U software, it's very easy to do. But I've got that pocket lined up, and now in the middle of the pocket, before we advance further in the Applique in the software lesson, I'm just going to real quickly go back to the original project and point out a few things as we progress in the software. We created an artwork rectangle, and that artwork rectangle, if you see my mouse as I go through here, is representing this outer pocket area. This is what you stitch down the center here to create 3 separate pockets. Applique 1 will go on the left pocket, and then you will do an applique on the right-hand pocket. And as I said, ladies and gentlemen, this is just a suggested scenario. We're going to, on the back of the apron, so this is the main piece of the back of the apron, we're going to stitch out our little second part of the designs, and I'll show you how. It's just a matter of, we're going to stitch everything separately. But we're going to create 3 additional applique components. This is applique. We're going to generate applique out of artwork right here. And so we're going to create an eye and a heart. So those are the first 2 appliques. And then we'll come down and we'll create this 2, and then this is just embroidered text. Let me go back over to my software so that I can show you how we're going to do this. You're going to click on your custom shapes. This is a whole library that comes with your software of custom artwork shapes. And you'll see there's a drop down. There's the custom shapes, and then there's another category called Easy Art. We'll start with custom shapes. When I scroll down, this is where I just real quickly grab my heart from. You'll see you have actually 4 hearts to select from. This is the heart that I'm going to use, heart 004. I select it, I bring it in. This is artwork, and let me change the color on that. All right, let's move it over here. Then we're going to add another piece of artwork. We're going to go back into our custom shapes library. We're going to go to the drop down and we're going to go into easy art, excuse me. I'll scroll down just so that you can see that it's a whole nother assortment of artwork that you can bring in to your Floriani software and work with. We're going to use this eye right here and bring that in. When you bring that in, notice that it is filled. Over in the Properties dialog box, while it is selected, if I deselect that box that says Fill and click on Apply, then it's going to go ahead and update that for me. On the pen width, do you see on this heart, I can change the width of that heart. And this is not in the paper handout, but I was just looking at this thinking, oh, I probably should show people that. So if I wanted to make that line a little bit narrower, I could come in and click on Apply. Or if you notice, this has a 0 pen width, and I could come in and make this a 0 pen width. Just for your information so that you know that that is available for you. I really try to, every time I see a little tool or something like that that maybe you might utilize, I like to illustrate it for you. To turn any artwork into a stitch file, notice that when I have this artwork selected, either this artwork box or the heart or the eye, down here on the very bottom of my screen, this is called your Stitch Effects toolbar. And that toolbar allows you to generate an assortment of stitches from artwork shapes. And in the real world, when people create embroidery designs, they start with artwork. It's either a raster-based file or a vector file, but they draw the artwork first, and then they use that to create their embroidery designs. If I deselect that, if you'll notice, that toolbar is grayed out. This is another thing I love about Floriani software. If a tool is grayed out, it's because you can't use it. So it's really giving you visual clues in the software on different features that you can do. So let's go back and grab that eye. Let's turn it into an applique, and it's one click. Down on that Stitch Effects, this green bush right there is the applique. I come over to my heart, one click. I've just created my own applique. I'm going to zoom in on the applique. I want to show you this feature. I'm going to go back into my slow redraw all the way over into that heart and pause it right there. In Floriani software, when you create applique, it's going to generate your placement file. And if you remember, as I'm pointing with my cursor, this outside stitch file, it's a running stitch, and that is your placement file. This is going to stitch first, the machine will stop, and then you will lay your fabric over the top of that. In the Floriani software, though, when it creates your placement file, automatically insets the placement file just slightly. The reason for that is that I lay my fabric down and then it stitches right here. When I come back and trim the fabric away with my scissors, if you do not stitch close enough, then as your satin stitch covers that raw edge, if you haven't stitched your fabric close enough, you're going to get little threads that pop out. I actually saw a post by someone on Facebook not too long ago. They took a picture, they were new to Applique, and that was the problem that they were having. They had these little fibers of the fabric that was poking out underneath the stitches, and the question was, what did I do wrong? It has to do with how you trim your fabric. So that's why that is placed inset. The other option or the other problem that you can run into, and I've done this before, you get really aggressive when you're trimming your fabric away. And what happens is if you trim too closely, your fabric pulls apart from underneath the stitches that are holding it, and the fabric will come loose. And then when you start and put that cover stitch on there, the fabric is buckled, or it works away on the inside of the fabric. So that's one of the features that I love about Floriani Applique embroidery. We're going to do two things with this embroidery. So I'm just going to zoom out to fit. And let me go back to my tools so we can see both of these different files. The first thing I want to do is I'm just going to, remember, I'm only manipulating in my software these designs. I'm using it as a placement. And I might make this eye just a little bit smaller in there. I love. And I'll go back real quickly to show you we're creating this eye and that heart right there. Back to my software. On this heart right here, you can change the cover stitch. The default cover stitch in Applique is a satin stitch because we lay down a piece of fabric, we trim the fabric away, and that satin stitch covers up the raw edges. You also have the ability to cut the fabric ahead of time. And this I'm going to use put the fabric down and then use the cover stitch on there, but I'm actually going to print an artwork file for this shape, and the two that we're going to create. I'm going to print that onto Applique Wonder. I'm going to fuse the Applique Wonder to my fabric, and I'm going to cut a piece of fabric that's the exact size of the outline. So instead of using that satin applique, I have my applique selected. On the Properties dialog, we're going to come up to Applique Type, click on that drop down, and I'm going to convert that from a satin stitch to a blanket stitch. And voila, I've just done that. And I love this feature in Floriani software. In other softwares, if you didn't want to stitch the tack down stitch, and I'm cutting my fabric outside with scissors, so I don't really need that tack down stitch to sew. All I need to do is deselect that. Okay, I don't have to break it apart or do anything else with that. I can update the blanket density in there, the applique. You do have the ability with this button right here to bring in fabric, and you can import fabric. I could take a picture of the fabric that I'm using on my project, or I could go to the manufacturer, the fabric manufacturer's website, and download the pictures of the fabric. But I do have the ability to add fabric into my applique so that I could get the visual effect of what that applique is going to look like. Let's take this piece of applique, and on this one, we're going to use a motif stitch over the top of that. And this is another feature that I think in the Floriani software is so much fun. So the motif stitch that we're going to use is F040. So you select motif, you come to the drop down, and these are all the different motif stitches that you can apply to that applique to give it a totally different look. And as I said, we're going to go down into the F. I'm going a little bit further. I'm scrolling with my mouse wheel, and I'm going to use this 040 and click on apply. And let's just zoom in on that so you can see. We've got 3D zoom in there. That is really going to give me a totally different effect on my apron. I have to tell you, I know you can't see my apron up close, but it really does look good. If you wanted to change the stitch length in there, you could. So let's just demonstrate that one so you can see. Maybe you want that a little bit larger. So you do have so many options with applique. And once again, I did not have to break that applique apart in order to make these changes to it. Well, I hope you've learned something about applique so far. Let's go ahead and zoom to fit. The next thing we want to do, let me go back here. As I said, if I grab the wrong tool and I have the wrong tool stuck on there, then it makes different changes in there. We want to now do two final things to our project. So toggling back over to the master file so that you can see it. So we've created this eye, we've created the heart. We're going to create a 2 now, and then this is, as I said, is just embroidered text. Let's do our 2. We're going to use this tool right here, which we haven't used before, and it's called Import TTF Artwork, and TTF stands for TrueType Font Artwork. I'm going to go ahead and select that. When you bring this up, I want to real quickly explain that TrueType fonts are not fonts that are specific to your embroidery software. TrueType fonts are installed on your computer, and every computer, depending on what software programs you have installed on your computer, and if you have added any additional fonts, every computer has its own library of TrueType fonts. I'm going to go ahead and I'd like to say that ahead of time, because when we start using TrueType fonts, if I were inadvertently to select a font in my computer, and I do download and install fonts, and I have a lot of different fonts on my computer, I probably would choose a font that you may not have. So fonts can really enhance things when you play with them. And artwork works beautifully when you're creating applique, and it's because applique is basically a shape. So I've got a 2. I'm going to click on select, and this is where you find all the various fonts that you have installed on your computer. And not only do you have to install fonts that are words, I'm going to do a video on this because I think it would be a great lesson, because fonts can really expand the tools that you have in your software, the artwork that you have in your software. You can download fonts that are artwork. I downloaded a font, and it's called Hawaiian Quilt Blocks, believe it or not. And so I can open up that font, I can bring in one of those shapes, and I can create a Hawaiian quilt block, which is applique, from a font. So we're going to bring in to our design the 2, and the font that I selected is actually called Mistral. And so I typed an M on my keyboard. I'm using the arrows to scroll down, and this is the font that I'm using right there, Mistral. I'm going to go ahead and leave the style regular, although I do have a couple of different options, and I'm going to make it a little bit larger and say okay. Now, if you were to bring this, and let me just go ahead and resize it. Okay. If you were to bring this font in and perhaps you didn't like the font, you can update the font. You have to go all the way back up here to the import TrueType font artwork. You're going to have to come back in here. You're going to have to select a different font. So if I brought in my 2 and I didn't like it for some reason, maybe this is the 2 that I wanted, and I would never use this 2 right there for applique, and I'll tell you why. The nature of this narrowness in there, it's not going to be very good applique. This is going to make a good applique shape. This is not. So let's go ahead and delete that. So this is the 2 that I've selected, and once again, to turn this into applique, it's one click. One click in there. I might undo that because I think when I showed you the eye, I selected that and I removed the fill in there first. And I don't know that that makes a difference, but that's the workflow that I showed you previously. So I'll stick to that particular workflow in there. So now we've got this applique right here, and we're going to leave this as a satin cover stitch, and this is really to do a compare and contrast. The last thing that we want to do is we're just going to come down and we're going to add some embroidered text. So I click on my text tool, I select my T, I put in my text placeholder, and I'm going to type in there sew, and it's going to be capital S-E-W. This is where you can customize the project for your specific attitude, apron with attitude. So maybe you want to make yours, I love to quilt, or I love to embroider, or I love to knit. I mean, you have the ability, especially if you purchase that You Design It collection, and you saw some of those, there's knitting needles in there. You have the ability to customize this apron and make it anything that you want. So that's why I encourage you to invest in those designs. We've typed in SEW. The font that we're going to use is the Breezy font, which I had pre-selected in there. We're going to click on apply. And then we're going to just take that and rotate it a little bit. Okay. And let me grab my select tool in here. And I'm going to take that sew and I'm going to make it a different color. Now I've got a lot of different colors in this design. Currently I'm at 28 different colors. When I get ready to embroider this design, that's not how many colors I'm going to actually be incorporating into it. We're going to prepare the designs now and we're going to print. We're going to print onto template tearaway, and I use template tearaway religiously. It is another feature. It's a Floriani product that I use and I love, because in a project like this, and going back to my apron, I want to illustrate this. For this perfect placement, especially of these sewing notions that are behind the pocket, template tearaway is what allowed me to put the apron together, to lay this on top, and to precisely put in that embroidery design so that it really does look like it's actually in the pocket. What we're going to do is we're going to break this design up and we're going to save it out in separate files, because we're not going to save this all as one file. We're going to stitch it individually. And this is how I broke mine up. I started off with these two elements right here, the eye and the heart. And I'm going to go back and select those. I'm going to do a cut. I'm going to open up a new page. I'm going to paste those. Once I've got these separate, then I'm going to go ahead and do my file Save As. And I'm going to go into my Applique apron and I'm going to save that design as ilove.waf. And then I will save that design for my machine. Once I have my design saved, I'm going to also print this onto a piece of template tearaway. File, print preview. Okay. So I'm just going to real quickly go over settings in there. We want to make sure that we have print actual size. We want to have show crosshair. I like to put a thick crosshair on there, and that's just a personal preference that I have. Artwork stitch mode, I always select remove jump stitches, and it'll just show you the jump stitches, and then say OK. And then I will put a piece of template tearaway into my machine, and I will print this onto a piece of template tearaway. Going back to our master design, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to grab the to sew. And I can use my window over in here, but I'm going to once again do a cut or a copy, and I'm going to open up a new document. I'm going to paste that in there. I'm going to do a file, save as. I'm going to go into my folder and I'm going to save this design as the to sew.waf, and then I will go file and I will print this. And I can do a print preview first, but I'm going to print this onto a piece of template tearaway also. I'm going to go back to my original design, and the next element that I'm going to separate out is actually, and I don't need both of the pockets with the sewing notions in there. And currently, let's go back up in here and just grab the sewing notions using the sequence view window and select those sewing notions, right click, let's do a cut. Okay, and I did a cut on that one especially because I wanted to make sure I had all of the elements from it. Let me open up a new document and paste it in there. Once I have it pasted in there, I'm going to do my save as. I'm going to save it, and then of course I'm going to print it on a piece of template tearaway. And then the last element that I need to have in a separate document is just the pocket. So I can also just grab that over here, or if you noticed, I did a big click and drag around the outside of it, and I have that selected. I can do a cut, new element, and then paste it in there. So I'm going to, when I do the design, as I said, this is not all one large design. I separated these out into individual designs. The whole purpose of laying out everything on here was just that, so that I could get a visual idea of how big the designs needed to be in relation to each other and fit them into that project. That's it for the software component of the August Applique apron with attitude. Let's go ahead and go back over into our PowerPoint and see how we're going to construct this project, because it's really quite simple. I cannot emphasize this enough. When you get ready to construct your project, I cut my fabric out first, but mark your fabric. I use a friction pen. The apron directions clearly tell you how to mark it, but on that outer pocket, you measure from the center, and then you're going to make 5 lines a ½ inch apart, and that is for your pleat. Goes together really, really sweet. Then you want to select your thread. This tip came from Marty Sandell. She is a Floriani educator, and when she mentioned it, I thought, that is a fantastic idea. Use the selvage of your fabric to select your thread colors. So here's the selvage of my fabric, and this is my main focus fabric. I had found this fabric. I fell in love with it. I love the colors. I love the theme with all the sewing notions. And I picked up this fabric with several pieces of coordinating materials that go along with it, knowing that one of these days a perfect project would come along for me to use it. So this is the main fabric, and here's my thread chart. So I just went in and looking at a color here on the selvage, then I just went ahead and said, oh, there's the color. And this was the color palette that I picked, so I got a real nice variety, and they match perfectly with that fabric. This tool right here, you're going to add bias binding around the outside of the apron to finish off the edge and actually across the top of the pocket. This is a little tool that I have, and I put on here, it's optional, but see your dealer. I have one of these bias binder attachments, and what it does is I cut the fabric on the bias, and then I feed the fabric through, and it's folds it around the fabric and stitches it down. So I get perfect bias binding placement every time. And I just wanted to mention that because every time I use this tool, and this is not a tool that you put a binding on a quilt, but for doing purses or bags or garments, this tool is indispensable. Every time I use it, I just love the fact that this tool works so great. It's a bias binding foot, and all of your big machine dealers will have some similar attachment for you. So we're ready to embroider. The outer pocket and the apron. So I've got this all laid out. I went ahead and folded my fabric and used a couple of clips. I didn't use my Pink Perfection tape because I folded the apron so that I could place the designs, but I'm going to have to unfold that pocket for the actual embroidery of the designs. So I take my template tearaway and I've got everything laid out. So I started with the outside of the apron. Once I got the outside of the apron done, then I laid it back over the top and did the inside of the apron. This is a fantastic idea. Going back on these pockets, I decided I was going to use a technique called fussy cutting of my fabric, where you cut a specific focus area so that that's what shows up. So here's the finished pocket, and I decided I was going to fussy cut a sewing machine so that's what showed up in the pocket. And then this is in the second pocket. I wanted to make sure I had the seam ripper. I wanted to have some pins and needles here and the tape measure. My template tearaway. I took my template tearaway, placed it onto the fabric where I wanted the pocket to go, cut around the outside perimeter of the fabric, and then laid that on the applique when I got ready to embroider it. It was really kind of a fun technique. When you are doing the applique and the hoop, and there's that piece of fabric that I cut, you want to carefully trim your fabric. This is applique in the hoop. This tool collection, your favorite tool collection, is perfect. So in your favorite tool collection, you've got, I'm going to use my cursor. These are what are called applique scissors, and they have a duck bill, and you could use those. But those are not my favorite tool. My favorite tool for trimming my fabric are my flat tweezers, and I actually use those tweezers to hold the fabric taut. And then I use these scissors that have the narrow sharp point on the end, and they allow me to really cut nice and close to these edges, and it's very quick. And then also those tips allow me to get into delicate areas for clipping. So I love those tools. As far as construction tips, adding rounded corners to the pocket, this is optional. You don't have to do it. I'm a gadget queen. This is a little tool that I have called the multi-sized curved corner cutter. And I used to use things like a spool of thread or a dinner plate or something like that. And you can still use those. But then I found this tool, and it's got 4 curves on there. And it's another tool in my arsenal that I use quite regularly for rounded corners, and you get a perfect round corner every time. So I thought I would mention that tool. It's not a Floriani tool, but it's great. When you get ready to attach the belt, so you've got your nylon webbing, and that nylon webbing, the ends of it are going to fray. Now, you're going to finish the edge, you're going to fold it and tuck it in, but this is just a little tip I picked up somewhere. You're going to melt the ends of the nylon webbing before you stitch it. And this requires a candle, a match, or a gas burning cooktop. I have a gas burning cooktop. I put on my lowest burner, and you're just going to take the end of your nylon webbing and run it through the flame. And then what it's going to do is it melts the end there, and it's going to keep the end of that from fraying. And so even though this was enclosed in the belt buckle, I still fuse the ends of the nylon webbing. As far as putting that nylon webbing and stitching it onto the apron, and I'm going to use my cursor to point this out, I used Stitch Perfection tape. Stitch Perfection tape holds the nylon webbing in place, and I love it. Remember, it is a water-soluble tape now. It's actually our Wet and Gone, so this would wash away in the wash if I inadvertently was sloppy in getting it on there and had a little piece sticking out. The stabilizer that I use in my hoop is actually a Floriani wet and stick. And with this particular project, the wet and stick, just with the texture of this fabric, it's a very nice heavy fabric. And with the wet and stick, I was able to stick my fabric down into the hoop, and with the heaviness of that fabric, once that adhesive dries on the wet and stick, it doesn't go anywhere. And then of course, to release the wet and stick, all you need to do is just re-wet that paper, and it tears away cleanly. I'm going to wrap it up there. As far as getting social in there, remember, if you make this project, please submit it to the Floriani Embroidery Facebook page. You can upload a picture of it there. You might label it #Applique Apron, #August Project, and of course, #Floriani Embroidery. Remember, I'm also on Instagram at Casey Farrell. I'm on Twitter at Casey Farrell. And until next month, I'm going to sign off and say happy sewing. One last thing, I will let you know that at the end of this video, I've included a real short, quick video on how to create the files for printing for doing applique. So this video will end. But then if you wait a minute, another short video will come on, and it's just going to be a quick lesson in the software on how you can take an applique design and you take the stitch file in there, you convert it to artwork, and then you can either send that to your cutting machine or you can print it off and onto Applique Wonder. Thank you so much. If you have any questions about the project, please feel free to email me. It's kathyf@rnkdistributing.com. This is a quick demonstration on how to create an artwork file that can be either printed onto Applique Wonder for applique or can actually be exported to one of your digital cutting machines. I'm going to start with the heart. Here's my applique. The first thing that I need to do is I'm going to right-click on the applique and I'm going to break up the applique. Once I have selected that, what you'll see is I've got now 3 separate files. Number 1 is the placement file 2 is the tack down file, and 3 is the cover stitch on there. Select the first file. Once you have that selected, come down into the Stitch Effects toolbar and click on Artwork. I have just converted that line to artwork. Now, at this point, I can do a file, I can do an export artwork, and I can export that either as an SVG file for a machine such as a Cameo Silhouette, a Janome Artistic, or if I'm working on a Brother, I can export that as an FCM file. The other option, and what I want to demonstrate now, is I'm going to cut this, and I'm going to also do the same thing for my eye. So let's real quickly right click and copy that. Let's open a new document and let's paste it. Let's go back to our applique. We're going to select that second applique, the eye. I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to do break up applique. Again, I'm going to go into this applique file, and I'm going to select the first part, the running stitch in here. I'm going to, once I have that selected, choose artwork, and then that artwork, I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it back into this document. Okay. Now, I would go back to this one, and I'm just going to undo everything that I had done prior to that and save it again. Then I'm going to go back over, so this is artwork. At this time, I could either, as I said, export this to my digital cutting machine, so export artwork. Now remember, this is artwork, so you're going to always export it. Export artwork. Once again, save it as an SVG file or an FCM file. If I want to print this onto Applique Wonder, I'm going to go File. I like to do a print preview just to make sure that it's going to fit on a page. Let me close that. Let me just get this lined up so that it all fits on one page. File, print preview. And then I would print this page. Let's go into our settings, and we don't need that crosshair for doing artwork. So I would print this onto Applique Wonder. If you are going to do any kind of a design that needs to be mirrored, make sure to do that first. And what I'm talking about is, let's close this. This design really doesn't work very well for that, but let me come in and let me grab that number 2 that we were working with, because this is the third applique that I would have. If I export this artwork currently as a 2 and print it, as soon as I apply this to the back of my fabric, it's going to be backwards. So when you are doing applique, you want to mirror the design, and that's very easy in your software. Select it, use this tool right here to flip horizontal, and now that's ready for you to export and cut on your machine, on your fabric, and it'll do a reverse. You're going to paste that, you're going to adhere that to the back of your fabric, you're going to cut along the lines, and you will have a perfect piece of fabric for your applique. Lastly, the files that are included in the August 2016 include the reverse artwork files for you and all of the individualized files.